morning, you're watching Businessworld Live. I'm Dani Laurel.
And I'm Jess De Los Santos. Here are the biggest stories to kickstart this trading day Wednesday. External risks prompt economic managers to trim their growth target for the country this year.
Incoming Labor Secretary Bienvenido Laguesma reveals his initial plans, which includes another look at issues hounding contractualization.
Finance Chief Sonny Dominguez says the plan of a BIR regional office to shut down Mega Road had no basis.
And proclamation nears for presumptive President Bongbong Marcos and presumptive Vice President Sara Duterte as the congressional canvass of votes proceeds quickly. We begin our broadcast with economic managers trimming their growth targets for 2022.
The Cabinet-Level Development Budget Coordination Committee, or the DBCC, says the downward revision is due mainly to growing risks from external uncertainties. The DBCC says that while the 8.3% GDP growth recorded in the first quarter has moved the government closer to achieving at least 7% growth this year, external risks have prompted economic managers to trim their full-year target from 7 to 9% to 7 to 8%. In particular, these risks include the prolonged war in Ukraine, China's economic slowdown, and the monetary policy tightening in the United States. NEDA Chief Carl Chua says the DBCC decided to keep the lower bound of the original target due to a strong domestic economy. Chua says the DBCC will continuously monitor and improve the country's domestic base to counter external shocks.
Meanwhile, Presidential Advisor for Entrepreneurship Joey Concepcion paints a rosier picture of the economy. Concepcion believes the economy will return to pre-pandemic levels by the second half, provided that the government does not bring back stricter quarantine settings. Concepcion also says the 8.3% increase in GDP in the first quarter can be taken as heralding a broader recovery. According to the presidential advisor, this return to robust economic growth can be sustained if the incoming administration focuses its efforts on the country's MSMEs.
Now, incoming Labor Secretary Benny Laguesma says he will seek the help of Congress as well as the labor and management sectors in addressing concerns on contractualization. Job contracting remains valid and recognized by the law. That is why, as Labor Chief, Laguesma says he wants to consult affected sectors with the help of Congress to fix provisions of the labor code that are supposedly abused by some employers. Laguesma also believes that outgoing President Duterte still fought illegal forms of contractualization despite rejecting the anti-ENDO bill. Now, to know more about his plans, we have on the show incoming Labor Secretary Bienvenido Laguesma. Secretary Laguesma, thank you for joining us today. I think, sir, you are on mute. Let's try to unmute first, sir, so that we can hear each other, sir.
Okay, sorry for that. Sorry.
No problem,
Good morning, Justin. Good morning, Danny, and good morning to your televiewers. Thank you for having me in your program today.
Congratulations, sir, also on your incoming appointment.
Okay, so let's kick things off again with the labor market. Of course, figures show, at least for the month of March, you have improving labor conditions here with unemployment at a new record low of 5.8%, but underemployment remains elevated at 15.8%. This is a lot about the quality of jobs deteriorating as Filipinos look for additional work. How do you plan to address this?
Well, first of all, Danny and Jester, let me consult the labor sector and also the employer sector, as well as look at the Department of Labor and Employment vis-a-vis its readiness, capacity, and from there move on to be able to provide jointly with the help of labor and management sector possible solutions to address the issue of underemployment specifically. Because you are correct, Jester. This is quite concern. I have a serious concern also on underemployment because it speaks about availability of more regular and more stable jobs for our country.
Okay.
But do you think, sir, that this is more a case also of an economy still trying to reopen due to the pandemic?
Yes, I think if our economy will really open up more, I think there will be more opportunities. And I would like to see local ones rather than the preferred choice of many of our countrymen seeking job elsewhere or abroad. With the help, again, just to be repetitive about it, solutions will be available, and I have to emphasize that I'm not bringing a magic wand nor a quick fix solution to all of these things. I have to really make sure that the sectors mostly affected will be part of the solution-making and decision-making process.
Okay, sir, let's talk about those sectors most affected in your opinion. In your opinion, sir, in your assessment, was there a major change na nangyari po during the pandemic in terms of the bright spots, the industries where we have most of this employment? Will there be permanent changes in those, and which industries are you going to be targeting particularly for job generation and creation?
Candidly, Danny and Jester, as I said, I am not categorically saying or proposing any solutions or major changes right now.
Okay.
It takes a little while to probably look into the situation and come up with something which is doable, implementable, and acceptable to the sectors affected. The opening up of our economy would be very contributory to the economic recovery of the country. And I think with the opening, relaxation of restrictions, and prayerfully, sana the pandemic will really go away, and we will have ease in movement, ease in being able to bring goods necessary to be able to spur the economy into development.
Okay, sir, on that note po, you want to continue some of the plans, sir. There was a nurse task force that was tasked to create 1 million jobs. Is that a feasible target for you this year?
I don't specifically have a number in my mind. I think numbers are targets, but these targets are dependent on several factors, no? And the most important of which would be working together of the employer sector and the worker sector, because I'm sure the investors, whether local or foreign, are looking at policies to be put in place, policies that are stable and conducive to further expanding or continuing with this business right now operating in the Philippines. I think this is really very critical for us that the international community also recognize the fact that we are moving to a direction where policies are actually predictable. There will be ease in doing business. And I would like to contribute with the other departments of the incoming Marcos Jr. administration in providing this kind of an environment, because otherwise we will not be able to really convince and inspire investors, even those existing investors right now, to really put their trust and confidence in our country.
Okay, Secretary Laguesmo, we do get it. I mean, you have been pointing out in this interview, of course, it's too early to have concrete plans just yet. But we do understand that you talked to presumptive President Bongbong Marcos. What exactly were his directions or instructions when it comes to contractualization, sir? I mean, he did promise that at least during the campaign period that he is going to review contractualization. But based at least from what you said during past interviews here, including the big story last night, language was... if we base it particularly on your language, it seems as though that you're not really that much in favor of a hard stop when it comes to contractualization.
Yes, the mandate really of President-elect Bongbong Marcos Jr. was to revisit the provisions of the labor code, which has been in place since 1974. When I was still young and you were not yet born, Danny and Jester. So, but the mandate, the directive is clear. Look at the welfare, the concerns, and also protection of the workers without jeopardizing the interests and also the concerns of the employers. Because after all, they should be social partners in the real sense of the word. Hindi pwede na, one will always be against the other, opposing whatever ideas that can help promote and spark development, particularly the creation of more local opportunities for our workers.
So do we take it to mean, sir, that there will still be some form of contractualization, at least under the Marcos administration?
And sir, what do you mean po by legal contractualization, which is what you mentioned in one of the articles po?
if you look at the labor code, it is very clear that it recognizes and does not prohibit legitimate job contracting, meaning it should be done in accordance with the law. There are permissible job contracting activities, and through the years, through the implementation, the issuance of interpretative bulletins, other decisions being rendered about the issue, it's like it becomes complicated and complex. That interpretation along the way has really bemuddled the issue, when in fact the labor code of the Philippines recognizes, as I would like to repeat, legitimate job contracting as well as permissible. And for example, just to be very clear about it, it is very permissible that yung janitorial messengeril services previously are actually recognized. Even security guards are part of those activities that can be legally subcontracted. But they should always comply with the basic minimum standards of the law. Payment of right wages, payment of the benefits due them, and then the most important thing is provision of health and safety measures to ensure that workers would be able to be safe and be at peace when they go to their places of work.
Okay. Sir, on that note, how do we balance po the wage hikes with the need to create more employments? We have some sectors, especially the industry, saying that it's so expensive to have this at the moment, sir, when they're trying to just get back on their feet. But at the same time, as you mentioned, we need to push for higher standards for higher skilled laborers as well.
Achieving a balance, Danny, is really a difficult task. It takes not just the Department of Labor and Employment to be able to do that. You have to consider the fact that our constituencies, those whom we are sworn to serve, include most especially the workers and the employers. And that's why when we try to craft a solution or probably recommendations, plan of action, very important would be their inputs, because they should have ownership on something that we would like to do, which we claim to be beneficial to both of the parties. I think if we are able to more or less have some form of modus vivendi or workable arrangement, we can move on. As I would like to reiterate, I do not have the very important magic wand. But I am bringing in the Department of Labor, which I have served for more than 2 decades, some of my thoughts, some of my experiences dealing with labor and management sector, and hopefully I will be able to make use of them to the fullest to be able to earn and get the support of both sectors towards a more better working environment for our workers.
Sec, is the 750 minimum wage call workable po for you?
Or at least is this something, a proposal that you would at least vow to study?
We always consider, the requirements of the workers. In fact, I know you are familiar with the criteria whenever the regional wages and tripartite productivity boards are considering petitions. There are 10 requirements. And if you look at it, it's quite tough to be able to put them all together. But the more important thing to consider really would be the needs of the workers and their family, and the capacity of the employers to be able to compensate properly and decently their workers. Right now, I think you are also familiar that majority of our firms, companies, belong to the small and medium enterprises. And these are basically owned and managed and run by Filipinos. So really, as pointed out by Danny, it's quite tough to really balance. 750 might not be really sufficient, even probably 1,000. But I think you have to look and be realistic that you have to look at the capacity of the employers to pay them. At the same time, would there be room for expansion to generate more jobs? These are considerations that when I assume the leadership of the Department of Labor and Employment, will be focused and seriously concerned, all in the name of looking at how we can come up with something doable, workable, and will not downgrade, the respect for workers as well as the respect that the employers also deserve.
Okay, now, Secretary Laguesma, before we let you go, you want to focus on one particular sector here, the agricultural space here. You have even farmers now being exported. You have the Labor Secretary, Silvestre Bello, saying that there's an oversupply of farm workers here in the Philippines. Your thoughts on this? And should the government continue sending abroad farmers at a time when economists are actually saying that we might actually be experiencing that we might experience a food crisis in the latter half of the year?
Part of my, the things that I have been considering over the last couple of days is that while I belong or I will be heading the Department of Labor and Employment, I would like to establish a very close coordination with a number of agencies that I think and I see to be very crucial in having or being able to generate more employment. One is the Department of Agriculture. Second is the Department of Health, Department of Tourism, and Department of the Trade and Industry, and of course, the Department of Interior and Local Government. I firmly believe that these are departments and the department that I will be heading that should really work closely, coordinate, and be one in a direction that is intended to provide decent employment for workers without thinking about leaving the country because of the social cost. I personally think, Danny and Lester, that this is not an impossible task. For as long as we live together, we work together, any heavy burden can be lighter. And just my appeal really is just give us a little time to do this. And I personally am committed to really put in whatever energies and years of my life being a senior citizen to contribute in any way I can to help better the conditions of the workers, and local employment should be their choice. And overseas employment should only be an option.
Okay.
Right now, overseas employment is the preferred choice. And very sad because we are sending away people who can help us generate more employment, develop our country, and provide the skills necessary. And so I'm also looking at the construction industry, the small and medium industries, and industries that really need the help in terms of providing the necessary and appropriate manpower. They are interlinked to the task of the Department of Labor and Employment in promoting, facilitating, and making sure that all the sectors concerned being affected by what the Department of Labor and Employment is mandated to do, to work together. This is, I think, really the handle that I'd like to bring in, that we should be united in our direction, not blind unity, because that is something that has to be earned, and it can be earned by showing that you are sincere.
Also, sir, with the newly created Department of Migrant Workers as well, no? I'm sure you will be working very closely and coordinating with them, sir.
So definitely it's going to be an interagency effort when we're talking about the labor market. Thank you very much for your insights this morning. Incoming Labor Secretary Benvenido Laguesma. Thank you, sir, and morning.
All the best to you, sir.
Thank you so much, Danny and Jester. We need all the luck, your prayers too. Maraming salamat.
Finance Chief Sonny Dominguez says the plan of a BIR regional office to issue a closure order against Megaworld had no basis. In an event in Manila, Dominguez said there is no finding that Megaworld did not pay their taxes. The finance chief also noted that BIR's announcement on a publicly listed company like Megaworld also affected their shareholders, which include government-run institutions like SSS and GSIS. Recall that a regional office of BIR claimed the closure order stemmed from Megaworld's refusal to comply with an audit. But Dominguez said Megaworld did not deny BIR access to its books and was only questioning the regional office's jurisdiction. The finance secretary adds that the audit on Megaworld would now be conducted by the large taxpayer service of the BIR national office and not the regional office. This following the DOF's order to suspend the creation of special audit task forces on real estate developers like Megaworld, as well as multi-level marketing firms, POGOs, and e-sabong firms due to redundancy in functions.
Presumptive President Bongbong Marcos and Presumptive Vice President Sara Duterte are moving closer to proclamation, which may happen later today. The tabulation of votes by Congress sitting as the National Board of Canvassers is proceeding quickly. In fact, the canvassing resumed at 9 a.m. today with less than 70 certificates of canvass left for counting. Congress suspended their session late last night after finishing the tabulation of 105 out of 173 COCs. The camps of Marcos Jr. and Sara Duterte earlier said that they will attend the proclamation once their victory becomes official.
Pausing for a quick break, but coming right up after that. We'll check how local shares are moving this Wednesday morning after the index sank further yesterday.
More of that and other stories when Business World Live returns. Stay with us.
And you're still watching Business World Live here on One News. I'm Jess De Los Santos.
And I'm Dani Laurel.
All right, Dan, the economic announcements of the incoming administration haven't done much so far to quell the bloodshed on the bourse, but this time it's a foreigner selling out again. Tell us more.
Exactly, Jess. So a lot of things going on, and in fact, yesterday the rest of Asia was shaky together with us. So we don't really know, whether it's domestic issues, whether it's the foreign issues weighing. But the one thing that did happen was the recession of the U.S. possibly being looked at by analysts here, especially as they're weighing the tightening that might plunge the U.S. into recession. We did have the sales of U.S. homes falling more than expected, and of course, China's COVID policy still in focus. You can see quite a mixed picture here with Japan opening in the red this morning. But if you take a look at the domestic fronts, I'm going to pull out the launch pad for you guys. It's again very mixed, although the composite is up by 0.3%, but still not back at those 6,600 levels. So we're still well below that. And nevertheless, there's still quite some sectors here in the red. Financial services, mining and oil in particular, though you do have holding firms leading the charge here, or at least the recovery from a couple of days of a sell-off. And like you mentioned, it was really the overseas investors. They sold the most stocks in 15 months yesterday, 9.6 billion pesos. But I do have to say, a lot of that was linked to the Converge block sale. That was 13.72 billion pesos that we lost from our foreign investors. But Jess, if there's one bright spot to be watching out for, madaming umiinom these days. And not just umiinom ng alak, but mas mahal na ang choices nila. So it's becoming more and more premium. That's according to Keepers. Let's take a look at how that's jumping up by 0.9% today. I'll pull out the 3-day chart so you can see that a little bit more clearer. This, according to them, liquor sales in the Philippines will likely reach 140 billion pesos by 2025. That's up 22% from last year. They did also mention that consumers are shifting to higher quality products. They're buying bottles more than 100 pesos per bottle. And they're looking at second quarter sales in liquor stronger pa than the first quarter sales. They said that those priced above 100 per bottle will jump 73% in terms of sales by 2025. And I wanted to look at Emperador as well, which is, of course, another liquor player here. That's up by 0.1% to 18 pesos and 54 centavos. And finally, before we end the market hit, Jess, Mega World, of course, in focus here after those statements of the Secretary of Finance, Dominguez, who did defend them from the so-called BIR misunderstanding. Mega World, however, down by 1 centavo, trading at 2 pesos and 76 today.
The PSE has suspended trading for several listed firms starting today due to their failure to comply with the structural reportorial requirements of the local bourse. The stock exchange said the listed firms have failed to submit their annual reports for 2021 and their first quarter reports for 2022. Trading has been suspended for these companies flashed on your screen until further notice. Meanwhile, the PSE will also halt trading for the following listed firms starting June 1.
Government-owned and controlled corporations reported a net loss of up to 703 billion pesos last year. The Finance Department attributes this to the adoption of new financial reporting standards, or PFRS, for financial statements of government insurers. The agency explains that the PFRC forced the recognition of major insurance contract liabilities, and the DOF says that prior to PFRS adjustments, state-run insurers were reporting a 19% increase in net income before tax in 2021. Despite this, the agency says that in terms of assets, the 31 most significant GOCCs are also signaling a recovery in the broader economy.
And that's a first look into the business day this Wednesday, May 25, 2022. Join us again tomorrow at exactly 9:30 a.m. You can also catch us on Signal Play. Register for a free account now at www.signalplay.com and stream One News Live anytime, anywhere. I'm Jess De Los Santos.
And I'm Danny Laurel. Mask on, wash hands, stay safe, Philippines. We are One News.